So at some point in our gaming lives, we have all been let down by sequels to our favorite games. And as one of the world's favorite games, Hades, and its successor Hades 2, has big shoes to fill. When the game hit in early access and came onto Steam, I jumped in and have been having such a good time that for the first time on this channel, I'm actually making a video that is not about our beloved Path of Exile.
Commander Riker, report.
We've lost him.
If you are on the fence as to whether or not to hit buy, then today we'll be covering the 4 ways I think this is the sequel that deserves to get you off the fence and back into the underworld. Let's get into it.
Few tales are told of Hades, whose reign as grim lord of the dead came to a sudden end when all at once his past caught up with him. But gods do not go quietly, and history repeats. So this tale was only a matter of time.
Right, let's get to the shiny stuff first. On top of all of the old systems like duo boons, keepsakes, vendors, heat and titan blood, which is now similar but called fear and nightmare, Supergiant have added multiple additional levels of complexity and nuance to the gameplay, events and progression systems. Arcana cards replace the Mirror of Night. The system is very similar, but I'd say is a nice UX improvement. Plus we now have Awakening, which is rewarded for having specific sequences of cards and choosing specific combinations of options. We're getting new area types, so the Fields of Misery are now large open spaces where you can choose multiple rewards by venturing around, finding different points of interest with some bonus stuff thrown in. One of the later floors, Tartarus, now allows you to either rush towards the boss or take an alternate but longer route where you can gain more power-ups. And then there's things like the Secret Pirate Ship, which is above ground and is a single area with multiple reward choices that you select periodically. Whilst not revolutionary, these different area types do add freshness and character to the experience on our 100 or even thousands of runs. Infusions are new effects that activate when we have a certain number of elemental god types, and now following on from that, each god that you select and each of their boons correlates to a certain element, and collecting enough of those elements combined with selecting an infusion allows you to gain some pretty powerful effects. Omega moves and Magicka are probably the biggest changes to the combat and the moment-to-moment feel of the game, and what really differentiates Zagreus from Melinoe. Not just because of the combat change, and it does definitely add a lot there, it also affects a lot of other systems. It means that we get a much wider variety of boon offerings and ways to change our build. The cast is way more powerful by default. We also get tools and familiars are pets. We've got 2 in the game at the minute that kind of follow us around, offer us some gathering resource stuff, as well as some nice little bonuses. And talking about gathering resources, that's where tools come in. We get to take 1 on each of our trips. That's something new and definitely something different. There's a lot more resources to manage. There's a lot more that you feel like you can pick up and discover on each run. And then the way that we spend those resources, from the cauldron but also to our own little farming simulator, is quite interesting, and just again adds a bit more nuance, a little bit more complexity. And then there's something called the Trials of Chaos, which are a system you unlock later in the game. They're kind of like handcrafted, curated runs that have very specific challenges, very specific areas, and very specific boon and weapon setups. And as you complete these, you get rewarded. Halion has covered this in his video. I'll put a link to that in the description, and that's the footage that you are seeing of this here. How many of these are going to be, if they're going to expand on this system, and what kind of custom content they can add later on, remains to be seen.
No! Return to Shadow now.
Yes, I may not be getting scouted for esports anytime soon, but most people agree. Hades 2 is a noticeable step up in the difficulty department. It's not on a whole other level, but we're talking a solid like 20 to 30% increased amount of sweat required. First off, the game feels a little slower and harder for your first 10-ish runs. Ultimately, I think this is part of a larger plan to make the game have a slightly longer playtime for most players, as there's a lot more content which we'll get onto later. Second, harder bosses. The bosses are more varied, they're a little more mechanically intensive, and let's just say it is clear to see how Kronos was able to best Hades in his own house and take over. The last point of difficulty on the game is that there is no more double or triple dashing. Instead, we get a single dash and we get the ability to sprint. And whilst it's not as high octane or even effective defensively, I do think that before in Hades 1 I was frantically dashing, I'd get my triple dash from Hermes and just be dashing around hoping to miss things. And this actually slows down the whole pace of combat slightly and makes the mechanics more readable. It means there's like less kind of jerk reaction timing of accidentally double dashing or triple dashing around, and makes every sort of decision and mobility choice every time you dash feel a little bit more impactful. It's a weird example of taking something away from the players that actually ends up making the health of the game and the moment-to-moment experience feel better. Something that I know is a hot topic in PoE 2 and is probably something we'll discuss a lot more going forward.
Olympus, I accept this message.
The third thing that makes this sequel so impressive is that on top of getting all of these new fresh details, these new systems and changes, the game simply just has more content to play through. Just how much, in fact, the devs actually had this to say.
What we can say at least is there are already more in Hades 2 in early access than in all of the original game, you know, the finished version of it. So.
We also have multiple runs available to us, gaining access to going overground on our way to Olympus, as well as heading into the underworld. Much more is still to be seen, with the true ending still in development.
We have our outline for where the story is going. Have we written the ending? No.
Are there multiple endings?
We have not made any endings yet. Actually, yeah, there's versions of endings. There's things that happen if you get all the way to the end of the current content that we have. Yes,
yeah, aspects of the narrative will only appear at the version 1.0 when it's all complete.
Alright, and the most obvious but also unobvious reason that this is an incredible sequel are the things that haven't changed. The beloved characters, art style, and visceral gameplay that made Hades Game of the Year are all very much present. From the first encounter with our sassy bestie Dora,
No deal.
to our villain, the new redacted Kronos, Melinoe's journey is filled with charismatic and distinct faces, both new and old. I've seen a few comments saying that the game looks just like the first, and whilst those comments were trying to express a sort of disappointment, I can't help but feel that for the most of us, this is a very good thing. And honestly, that is what actually inspired me to make this video and to ask this question. What do we expect from our sequels? Hades 2 has, in my opinion, done all of the things a great sequel should. To understand what made the game great in the first place and double down on that by deepening those systems. It has improved on the weaknesses of the first title, specifically cast stands out to me. They've stuck true to their vision with all of the charismatic characters and the art style that made the game so iconic in the first place. And they've given us, the fans, simply more of it. They've given us more to do, more to explore, and more to discover. This is, of course, just an early review of my time in early access, but it's been so good that I wanted to share my excitement and show Supergiant some love. With all of the disappointment that surrounds highly anticipated games these days, understandably, I didn't want to get my hopes up for this game. Though, by the grace of the gods, I can already say that while this game may not be the most surprising sequel, it is absolutely the sequel we deserve. As always, thank you so much for watching. We've got D4's last-ditch attempt to bring back the core ARPG audience coming with Season 4. We are definitely going to be checking that out. So if you want to come over and join us, I will be on Twitch. We love talking about games, more specifically the design, the user experience, and the artwork. So if that's the sort of conversations you like to have, that is your bag, then follow my Twitch link in the description and give us a follow and you'll be notified when I go live. Until then, friends, exiles, I will see you in the next one. Ta-da.
Good.
Not good enough.
We can but learn. And the greatest teacher is out there. Now go. Death to Kronos.
Death to Kronos.